There are versions of you that can still feel close long after you have outgrown the life they belong to. You may remember how certain you once felt, how familiar your routines were, how easily you knew what your role was. You may even miss the people, places, habits, and expectations that came with that version of you. And then a confusing thought can appear: if I miss who I was, does that mean I made a mistake by changing? Not necessarily. Missing an old version of yourself is not the same as wanting to live by that version again. Sometimes what you miss is not the pattern itself. You miss the familiarity. You miss the predictability. You miss knowing exactly who you were supposed to be. This becomes especially important after 50, because identity can be tied to decades of repetition. Maybe you were the reliable one, the peacemaker, the provider, the person who never needed much, the person everyone could count on. Those roles may have cost you something, but they also gave you structure. People knew how to respond to you. You knew what was expected. Even an exhausting identity can feel safe when it has been rehearsed for years. Then something changes. You become less willing to overextend yourself. You stop explaining every decision. You begin protecting your time. You admit that some relationships only worked when you stayed small, useful, quiet, or endlessly available. And a new life starts to form. But growth does not erase attachment to what came before. You can miss the old Sunday routines even if those gatherings left you depleted. You can miss being the person everyone called first even if you no longer want to carry every crisis. You can miss a former marriage without wanting the marriage back. You can miss a job that gave you status while knowing you would never return to the pressure it demanded. You can miss the person you were at 40 without wanting to hand that person control of your life at 60. That is the first important distinction: nostalgia is not instruction. A feeling can tell you that something mattered without telling you that it should return. Sadness can honor an ending. Tenderness can recognize what was meaningful. Even longing can exist without becoming a plan. Imagine someone who spent 30 years being the one who kept a family together. She remembered birthdays, softened arguments, hosted every holiday, and quietly adjusted her own needs so the room stayed calm. Over time, she realized how much of herself had disappeared inside that role. She began setting limits. She stopped fixing every disagreement. She let other adults carry their own disappointment. Months later, she looks at an old photograph from a crowded family dinner and feels an ache. Everyone was together. She was needed. She knew exactly where she belonged. The ache is real. But it does not automatically mean the old arrangement was better. What she may be grieving is a form of certainty. The old role gave her a clear identity: I am the one who holds everything together. The new identity is less defined. It asks harder questions. Who am I when I do not manage everyone? What kind of closeness remains when I am not constantly useful? What do I choose when no role is waiting to choose for me? That uncertainty can make the past look cleaner than it was. Memory rarely returns as a full accounting. It can bring back the warmth of the kitchen without the exhaustion afterward. It can bring back the laughter without the resentment. It can bring back the confidence of knowing your role without reminding you how narrow that role had become. This is where people can mistake grief for a command to reverse course. They feel lonely, so they return to the relationship that required self-abandonment. They feel uncertain, so they take back responsibilities they had finally released. They feel guilty, so they rebuild the exact pattern they worked hard to understand. But discomfort in a new identity does not prove the old identity was right. Sometimes it only proves the new one is still unfamiliar. The deeper task is not to reject who you were. It is to place that version of you in the right position. Your former self may deserve gratitude. That person may have protected you, carried you through difficult years, created stability, raised children, built a career, survived losses, or kept life functioning when there were few other options. You do not have to insult that version of yourself in order to grow beyond it. But gratitude is different from obedience. You can say, that version of me got me here, without saying, that version of me must decide what happens next. This is the main shift. Maturity is not always becoming someone completely new. Sometimes it is changing the relationship you have with who you used to be. Instead of trying to erase the old identity or return to it, you can let it become part of your history rather than the manager of your present. That changes the question. Instead of asking, "Do I still miss who I was?" ask, "What exactly do I miss?" Do you miss the person, or the certainty? The relationship, or the belonging? The job, or the recognition? The constant responsibility, or the feeling of importance? The old routine, or the fact that you never had to wonder what came next? Those answers matter because they separate the need underneath the nostalgia from the old structure that once met it. If you miss belonging, perhaps belonging can be built differently. If you miss contribution, perhaps you can contribute without becoming indispensable. If you miss confidence, perhaps confidence can come from making choices that fit who you are now. If you miss closeness, perhaps closeness can exist without returning to the role that required you to disappear. You do not need to turn the past into an enemy to keep moving forward. There may always be moments when an older version of you feels easier to understand than the person you are becoming. That is not failure. Identity can change faster than familiarity. The new life may be healthier, more honest, and more aligned, while still feeling less automatic. So when you miss who you were, do not rush to interpret the feeling as proof that you should go back. Let the feeling be specific. Let it tell you what mattered. Let it show you what you still need. Then decide whether that need belongs in your present, and whether it can be met without rebuilding the life you already outgrew. You are allowed to honor the person you were. You are allowed to grieve what ended. You are allowed to feel tenderness for a life you would never choose again. And you are also allowed to keep going. If this reflection speaks to where you are now, continue with the Finding Yourself After 50 playlist. And if you want more thoughtful conversations about identity, change, and life after 50, subscribe to Inner Life Decoded.